The Great Hall of the Galactic Council Station was the largest room that any human had ever seen. It stretched for what seemed like miles in every direction. With seats and platforms built for creatures of every shape and size, some delegates floated in water tanks. Others hung from the ceiling like massive bats. A few existed as pure energy, contained in special force fields that hummed with power. Ambassador Laura Mitchell stood at the human delegation's podium, her hands resting calmly on the smooth surface in front of her. She wore the formal uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, a simple, dark blue suit with silver trim. Nothing fancy, nothing threatening. That was the point. Beside her, Kevin Park shuffled through holographic documents, his fingers moving a little too fast. He was nervous. Laura could tell. She had worked with Kevin for 6 years now, and she knew all his tells. The way he kept checking the same files over and over, the slight sweat on his forehead. The way he avoided looking at the massive aliens surrounding them. Earth had been part of the Galactic Council for only 12 standard years. In galactic terms, that was nothing. Some of the species in this room had been members for 10,000 years. They had watched stars be born and die. They had built empires that spanned entire arms of the galaxy. And then there were the humans, newcomers, from a small blue planet orbiting an ordinary yellow sun. Most of the elder species viewed humanity with what Laura called polite condescension. They were nice enough. They smiled their alien smiles and made friendly noises through their translators. But Laura knew what they really thought. They saw humans as children, amusing, harmless, not really worth taking seriously. That was about to change. The Vorthani delegate rose from his platform. His name was High Arbiter Zethkel, and he was one of the most respected figures in the council. His body was made of living crystal, blue and silver, and constantly shifting. When he moved, he made sounds like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Fellow delegates, Zethkel began, his voice resonating through the chamber. I've called this emergency session to address a matter of grave concern. The Kreth Dominion has grown beyond our ability to ignore. A wave of murmurs passed through the assembly. The Kreth were a topic that made everyone uncomfortable. They were a warrior race, aggressive and expansionist. For centuries they had been a minor power, confined to a small cluster of systems at the edge of known space. But something had changed in the past few decades. They had begun to expand, and they had begun to conquer. In the past cycle alone, Zethkel continued, the Kreth have absorbed 17 independent systems. They have destroyed 3 sentient species entirely. They have enslaved to others, and they show no signs of stopping. The holographic display at the center of the chamber lit up, showing a map of the galaxy. Red markers indicated Kreth territory, and that red stain was spreading like a wound. We must form a unified defense coalition, Zethkel declared. We must put aside our differences and stand together against this threat. If we do not, the Kreth will consume us all, one by one. Sounds of agreement filled the hall. The Solani delegation, aquatic beings who looked something like giant octopuses with too many eyes, expressed their support through their speaker. The Makari insects, the size of horses who shared a hive mind, clicked their approval in unison. Laura watched and listened. She had been expecting this moment. She had been preparing for it. A reptilian delegate named Theric rose from his seat. He was a Yulani, a species known for their sharp minds and even sharper tongues. His scales were dark green, and his eyes were the color of molten gold. A coalition sounds wonderful, Theric said, his voice dripping with something that was not quite sarcasm. But coalitions require contributions from all members, and I wonder what the humans plan to contribute. Every eye in the chamber turned toward Laura. She could feel the weight of their attention. Hundreds of alien minds all focused on her at once. The humans have been members of this council for barely a decade, Theric continued. They have one defended system, one homeworld, a fleet that could be destroyed by any of the elder powers in a matter of hours. What could they possibly offer to a war against the Kreth? Kevin's hand stopped moving. He looked at Laura with wide eyes, silently asking what she planned to do. Laura gave him a small nod, a signal that everything was under control. She stepped forward and addressed the assembly. "Ambassador Theric raises a fair point," she said. Her voice was calm and clear, carrying easily through the chamber. "Humanity is young. Our military forces are limited compared to the elder powers. We cannot offer fleets of warships or armies of soldiers." Theric made a sound that might have been satisfaction. Other delegates exchanged knowing looks. The humans were going to admit their weakness. This was expected. "However," Laura continued, "we can offer something else. Something that might be equally valuable." She gestured to Kevin, who handed her a small data chip. Laura inserted it into the console at her podium, and the holographic display changed. "This is Contingency Protocol 7, Laura said. "It is our strategic response plan for the Kreth Dominion." The display showed detailed maps of Kreth space. It showed fleet positions and supply lines. It showed the locations of their shipyards, their fuel depots, their command centers. It showed psychological profiles of their leaders, including their fears and weaknesses. It showed communication codes that the Kreth thought were unbreakable. The chamber went silent. Completely, utterly silent. Laura let the silence stretch. She wanted them to understand what they were seeing. She wanted them to realize that the young, harmless, not worth taking seriously humans had been watching the Kreth for years. They had been studying them. They had been preparing. High Arbiter Zethkel was the first to speak. His crystalline form had changed colors, shifting from calm blue to alarmed orange. "Ambassador Mitchell," he said slowly, "this level of preparation is remarkable. When did humanity begin monitoring the Kreth?" Laura met his gaze without flinching. "We began our assessment of the Kreth Dominion on the day we joined the Galactic Council. It seemed like the sensible thing to do." "The Kreth were not considered a significant threat 12 years ago," Theric interjected. His earlier smugness had vanished. "They were nothing. A minor irritation at best." "We noticed their potential," Laura replied simply. The assembly erupted in conversation. Delegates turned to each other, speaking in rapid bursts that the translators struggled to keep up with. The humans had surprised them. The humans had done something that the elder species had not expected. Kevin leaned close to Laura and whispered, "You scared them?" Laura nodded slightly. "Good," she said. "Fear is the first step toward respect." She looked out at the gathered aliens, watching them try to process what they had just learned. They had thought they understood humanity. They had been wrong, and the real surprise was still to come. The noise in the chamber continued for several minutes. Laura stood patiently at her podium, watching the alien delegates argue among themselves. She could see the confusion on their faces, or what passed for faces among species that did not have human features. The Vorthani crystals were flickering with agitation. The Makari were clicking so fast that it sounded like rain on a metal roof. The Solani had retreated deeper into their water tanks, as if trying to hide. Finally, High Arbiter Zethkel raised one of his crystalline appendages, calling for silence. The chamber slowly quieted down. Ambassador Mitchell, Zethkel said, "Your presentation has raised many questions. I hope you will answer them honestly." Laura nodded. "I will do my best. How did humanity gather this intelligence?" "The Kreth are notoriously secretive. Our own agencies have tried for centuries to penetrate their information networks without success." Laura had prepared for this question. She had prepared for all of the questions. "Humans are curious by nature," she explained. "When we joined the Galactic Council, we wanted to understand our new environment. We sent observers. We listened to communications. We analyzed patterns. We are patient and we are thorough." She did not mention the human agents who had spent years living in Kreth space, disguised as members of other species. She did not mention the quantum decryption programs that Earth's scientists had developed. She did not mention the network of informants that humanity had cultivated across the galaxy. "Some secrets were worth keeping, patient and thorough," Theric repeated, his golden eyes narrowing. "Those are interesting words. They suggest long-term planning. They suggest that humanity has been playing a deeper game than any of us realized." "We prefer to be prepared," Laura said. Ambassador Prila of the Solani rose from her water tank. She was a beautiful creature in an alien way. with skin that shimmered like pearls and tentacles that moved with graceful precision. Her translator rendered her bubbling speech into a calm female voice. Ambassador Mitchell, I must ask a question that I suspect many of us are thinking. You have shown us your contingency plans for the Kreth, but the Kreth are not the only potential threat in this galaxy. Laura felt her heart beat a little faster. This was the moment she had been waiting for. No, she agreed. They are not. So I must ask, Prela continued, does humanity have contingency plans for other species? Species that might, under different circumstances, become threats to Earth. The chamber fell silent again. This time, the silence was heavier. It pressed down on everyone like a physical weight. Laura looked at Kevin. Her aide had gone pale. He knew what she was about to do, and he disagreed with it completely. They had argued about this for weeks. Kevin believed that some secrets should never be shared. Laura believed that the only way to build real trust was through radical honesty. She turned back to face the assembly, as she said. Humanity has contingency plans for every species represented in this chamber. The silence shattered. Delegates shouted in alarm. Some jumped to their feet. Others reached for communication devices, presumably to warn their home governments. The Makari collective buzzed with such intensity that the sound was almost painful. Theric's voice cut through the chaos. You would plan war against your allies, he demanded. Against the very species who welcomed you into the galactic community? Not war, Laura said firmly. Contingency. There is an important difference. Explain this difference, the Makari collective said, speaking as one voice. Explain it clearly, human, because from where we stand, it looks very much like you have been planning to attack us. Laura stepped away from her podium and walked toward the center of the chamber. Protocol said she should stay at her designated position, but she needed them to see her. She needed them to look at her and understand that she was not a monster. Humanity has a long history, she began. Much of that history is painful. We have fought wars against each other for thousands of years. We have betrayed each other, killed each other, done terrible things to each other. We have learned hard lessons about trust and survival. She turned slowly, meeting the eyes of delegates around the room. One of those lessons is this: alliances change. Friends become enemies. Peace becomes war. It happens without warning, sometimes without reason. The species that survives is the species that prepares for every possibility, even the possibilities it hopes will never happen. So you prepare to fight us, Zethkal said. Your friends, your allies. We prepare to defend ourselves, Laura corrected gently, against anyone who might threaten us. We do not want to fight you. We hope we will never have to fight you. But we will not pretend that conflict is impossible just because it is unpleasant to consider. Prila spoke again, her voice thoughtful rather than angry. This is a very human way of thinking. You assume the worst about everyone. We prepare for the worst, Laura said. We hope for the best. That is not the same thing, is it not? Theric asked. When you study our weaknesses and develop weapons to exploit them, what message does that send? How are we supposed to trust you? Laura stopped walking and faced the Yulani delegate directly. You are supposed to trust us because we are being honest with you, she said. Right now, in this moment, we could have kept our contingency plans secret. We could have smiled and nodded and pretended to be harmless. Many species would have done exactly that. She spread her hands in a gesture of openness. We chose to tell you the truth instead. That is the foundation of real trust, Ambassador Theric. Not comfortable lies. Not polite pretending. The truth even when it is uncomfortable. The chamber was quiet again, but this quiet was different from before. The fear was still there, but it was mixed with something else. Curiosity, perhaps. Or the beginning of understanding. Kevin caught Laura's eye and gave her a small nod. Maybe this was going to work after all, but Laura knew that the hardest part was still ahead. She had told them that humanity had contingency plans for everyone. Now they would want to know what those plans contained. And that was a conversation that would change everything. Ambassador Prila raised one of her tentacles, requesting permission to speak. The gesture was elegant, almost beautiful. And Laura found herself admiring the Solani's grace even in this tense moment. Ambassador Mitchell Prela said, "You have admitted that humanity has contingency plans for all of us. This is disturbing, but I appreciate your honesty. Now I have a request." "Go ahead," Laura said. "Would you be willing to share the nature of these plans?" "Not every detail, of course, but enough for us to understand what we are dealing with. Enough for us to know what humanity sees when it looks at us." Laura had expected this request. She had debated how to handle it for months. Kevin had argued against sharing anything more than the bare admission. He said it would only make things worse. But Laura believed in the power of truth. She believed that hiding in shadows only created more shadows. She returned to her podium and nodded to Kevin, who reluctantly uploaded a new file to the chamber's display system. "I will share a general overview," Laura said. "I believe that transparency is the only path forward." The holographic display shifted, showing a series of folders arranged in a grid. Each folder had a number instead of a name, but everyone in the room understood what they represented. Each number was a species. Each folder was a plan for how to defeat them. Laura began to speak, and her voice was calm and steady. This was the hardest thing she had ever done, but she would not let her voice shake. "Our contingency protocols are designed around each species' unique characteristics," she explained. "We study biology, psychology, social structures, technology, everything. We look for strengths, but more importantly, we look for weaknesses." She gestured toward the Vorthani section of the chamber. "Hi, Arbiter Zethkal. I will start with your species. The Vorthani are magnificent beings. Your crystalline forms are beautiful and incredibly durable. You can survive in environments that would kill most other life forms. You are wise and ancient and powerful." Zethkal's form flickered with cautious colors. He was listening. "But your biology has a weakness," Laura continued. "Your crystalline structure is sensitive to certain sound frequencies. Harmonic vibrations in the right range can disrupt your cognitive processes. At higher intensities, they can cause structural damage." She paused to let that sink in. Humanity has developed emitters that can produce these frequencies. They are small enough to fit in a standard missile. Effective range is approximately 10,000 kilometers. Zethko's form went dark, then slowly returned to a deep purple that Laura did not recognize. Fear, perhaps, or anger, or something in between. Laura turned to the Solani delegation. "Ambassador Prilla, your species is equally impressive. The Solani are brilliant diplomats and scientists. Your ability to process multiple streams of information simultaneously is unmatched. You have built one of the most prosperous civilizations in the galaxy." Prila's tentacles curled slightly inward, a defensive posture. "But the Solani require a very specific environment to survive. Your water must contain precise combinations of minerals and chemicals. Without them, your cellular structures begin to break down within hours." Laura kept her voice gentle, but the words were not gentle at all. "We have identified the key compounds in your water supply. We know how to neutralize them. If necessary, we could render every Solani habitat in the galaxy uninhabitable within a single day." Prilla sank lower in her tank. Her many eyes fixed on Laura with an expression that might have been horror. Laura turned to face the Makari collective. "The Makari are perhaps the most efficient species in known space. Your hive mind structure allows for perfect coordination. 1 billion Makari can act as one without hesitation or disagreement. It is remarkable." The clicking from the Makari section grew louder. "But your strength is also your weakness. The hive mind depends on Quinn nodes, the central intelligence that connects and directs all the others. There are only a few thousand Quinn nodes in your entire species. Without them, the individual Makari become confused and disorganized." Laura met the gaze of the nearest Makari representative. "We have mapped the location of every Queen node. We have developed weapons that can destroy them from outside your defended space. A targeted strike could cripple your entire civilization in less than an hour." The clicking stopped. The silence from the Makari was somehow more frightening than their noise had been. Laura paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the chamber. She had just described, in clinical detail, how humanity could destroy 3 of the most powerful species in the galaxy. She had painted a target on her own back. Every delegate in the room was looking at her differently now. "I share these details not as threats," she said firmly. "I share them because you asked. Because you deserve to know what we know. Because secrets are poison to trust." Theric spoke, his voice quieter than before. "Do you have similar plans for the Yulani?" "Yes. And you would share them with me if I asked?" "Yes. I would tell you that your species requires a specific hormone to regulate aggression. Without it, Yulani become violent and irrational. We have synthesized a compound that blocks this hormone. It can be delivered through air or water." Theric's scales rippled with colors that Laura could not read. He sat back in his seat and said nothing. The chamber was utterly still. Laura could hear her own heartbeat, loud in her ears. She had done it. She had shown them the truth about humanity. Now she had to hope that the truth would set them free instead of destroying them. Kevin touched her arm gently. "You have their attention," he whispered. "What happens now?" Laura took a deep breath. "Now we find out if they can handle the truth." She raised her voice to address the assembly once more. "Every species in this room has the ability to destroy humanity. You have bigger fleets, better technology, more resources. If you decided to wipe us out tomorrow, there's nothing we could do to stop you." She let that statement hang in the air. "But now you know that the cost would be high. Now you know that humanity would fight back. Now you know that we are not the harmless children you thought we were." She looked around the chamber, meeting as many eyes as she could. "That is not a threat. That is equality. That is respect. We see you clearly, and now you see us clearly too." The assembly called for a recess. It was the only sensible thing to do. The delegates needed time to process what they had heard, time to consult with their governments, time to decide how to respond to the revelation that the young human species had been preparing for war against all of the them. Laura retreated to the human delegation's private chamber with Kevin close behind her. The room was small and plain compared to the grandeur of the main hall, but Laura appreciated its simplicity. A table, a few chairs, a window that looked out on the stars. It felt like home. Kevin started pacing the moment the door closed behind them. "That was either the bravest thing anyone has ever done, or the stupidest," he said. "I honestly cannot tell which." Laura walked to the window and looked out at the darkness of space. Somewhere out there, billions of kilometers away, Earth was spinning through the void. Her homeworld, her people. Everything she had sworn to protect was necessary, she said. Was it? Kevin stopped pacing and faced her. "You just told 100 alien species exactly how we would kill them. Do you have any idea what they are going to do with that information?" "They are going to think about it. They are going to analyze it. And eventually, they are going to realize that we could have kept it secret, but chose not to. Or they are going to form an alliance and come to destroy us before we can threaten them." Laura turned away from the window and smiled at her aide. It was a tired smile, but a genuine one. "Kevin, they could have destroyed us at any time during the past 12 years. The Vorthani alone have enough firepower to turn Earth into rubble. They did not need a reason. If they wanted us gone, we would already be gone." Kevin opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. He could not deny the logic. "So why did you do it?" he asked finally. "Why take the risk?" Laura poured herself a glass of water from a pitcher on the table. Real water, imported from Earth. A small luxury that she allowed herself on diplomatic missions. "Because we were invisible," she said. "For 12 years we have been tolerated by the galactic community. We have been patted on the head and told to sit in the corner while the adults talk. No one took us seriously because no one saw us as a real power." She took a slow sip of water. "Now they see us. Maybe they are scared. Maybe they are angry. But at least they are paying attention." A chime sounded at the door. Someone wanted to enter. Kevin looked at Laura, who nodded. He opened the door to reveal High Arbiter Zethkal, his crystalline form cycling through uncertain colors. "May I come in?" the Vorthani asked. "Of course," Laura said. "Please, join me." Zethkal glided into the room. He did not sit because Vorthani did not sit in the way humans understood. Instead, he settled into a stable configuration, his crystals arranging themselves into something like a comfortable pose. "Ambassador Mitchell," he said, "I have been thinking about what you revealed to the Assembly. I have many questions. I expected you would. Your species is remarkable. In 12 years, you have gathered intelligence that our own agencies failed to collect in centuries. You have developed weapons against races that have existed since before your sun was formed. How is this possible?" Laura set down her glass and considered her answer carefully. This was not just a conversation between two diplomats. This was a conversation between two civilizations. What she said now would shape how the galaxy understood humanity for generations to come. Humanity evolved on a difficult world, she began. Earth was not kind to us. We faced predators that wanted to eat us, diseases that wanted to kill us. Whether that could destroy everything we built in a single storm? Zethko listened, his form flickering with colors that Laura interpreted as interest. But the greatest threat we faced was each other, Laura continued. Humans have been at war with other humans for most of our history. We have fought over land, over resources, over ideas, over nothing at all. Every generation has known conflict. Every generation has learned to prepare for the worst. This explains your paranoia, Zethkel said, but not your capabilities. How did you develop such sophisticated intelligence networks in such a short time? Laura smiled. Because we have had thousands of years of practice. We have been spying on each other since before we invented writing. We have developed codes and ciphers and surveillance techniques that would make your head spin. If you had a head in the human sense. So you applied these skills to the galactic community. Yes. The moment we joined the council, we began watching. We watched everyone. We listened to every communication we could intercept. We analyzed every piece of data we could find. We've built models and simulations and predictions. Zethkal was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. Your species has created weapons capable of destroying your own world. You have the power to end yourselves, and you have come close to using that power more than once. That is true, Laura admitted.
And yet you did not?
You survived your own destructive nature. How? This was the question that Laura had been waiting for. This was the key to everything. We survived because we learned, she said. Every time we came close to destroying ourselves, we pulled back. We created treaties and protocols and safeguards. We've built systems to prevent our worst impulses from taking control. We learned that survival requires preparation, and preparation requires understanding. She met Zethkul's gaze directly. That is what you saw today in the assembly. Not aggression, not hostility. Preparation. We have studied every species in the galaxy because we need to understand them. We need to know what they might do so that we can be ready if they do it. Zethkel considered this for a long moment. His crystals shifted through a rainbow of colors that Laura could not interpret. You are a dangerous species, he said finally. More dangerous than we realized. Yes, but perhaps not in the way we feared. Laura allowed herself a small smile. We can only hope. Zethkel rose from his configuration, preparing to leave. But at the door, he turned back. The assembly will reconvene soon. The other delegates are debating how to respond to your revelation. Some want to demand your expulsion from the council. Others want to form a coalition against humanity. Laura nodded. I expected that. But some of us, Zethkel continued, are beginning to see things differently. Some of us are wondering what it would mean to have humanity as a true ally instead of a tolerated child. He glided out of the room without another word. Leaving Laura and Kevin alone with their thoughts, Kevin let out a long breath. That sounded almost like respect. Almost, Laura agreed. We are getting there. When the assembly convened, Laura could feel that something had changed. The atmosphere in the Great Hall was different from before. The fear was still present, hanging in the air like a fog. But there was something else mixed in with it now. Curiosity, perhaps? Or the first fragile seeds of understanding. She returned to her podium with Kevin at her side. Her aide looked calmer than before, though his hand still trembled slightly as he arranged the holographic documents. Laura appreciated his loyalty. She knew that he disagreed with her approach, but he had stood by her anyway. That was the mark of a true professional. High Arbiter Zethkal called the assembly to order. His crystalline form had settled into a neutral blue, giving nothing away. "We have all had time to consider the revelations of this session," he said. "The human delegation has been more honest with us than perhaps any species has ever been. This honesty has been disturbing. But I believe it deserves an equally honest response." He turned to face Laura directly. "Ambassador Mitchell, I have spoken with many of my colleagues during the recess. We have debated long and hard about what to do with the information you have shared. Some argued for expelling humanity from the Council. Others suggested more severe measures." Laura kept her face neutral, though her heart was racing. This was the moment of truth. Everything she had worked for, everything she had risked, came down to what happened in the next few minutes. But in the end, Zethkal continued, we reached a different conclusion. We realized that humanity has given us a gift. A painful gift, but a valuable one nonetheless. A murmur ran through the chamber. This was not what anyone had expected. "You have shown us what true honesty looks like," Zethkal said. "You have demonstrated that trust is not built on comfortable lies, but on uncomfortable truths. For that, we owe you our thanks." Theric rose from his seat, his golden eyes fixed on Laura with an intensity that made her want to step back. But she held her ground. "I have a proposal," the Yulani delegate said. "Ambassador Mitchell, you have contingency plans for every species in this chamber. You know our weaknesses, our vulnerabilities, our secrets. You have weapons designed specifically to destroy us." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Would you be willing to share those plans with us?" The question hit Laura like a physical blow. She had not expected this. She had prepared for anger, for rejection, for threats. She had not prepared for curiosity. "I do not understand," she said carefully. "Why would you want to know how to defeat yourselves?" Theric made a sound that his translator rendered as a dry laugh. "Because knowledge is power, Ambassador. If we know our own weaknesses, we can work to address them. We can become stronger. We can be better prepared for threats from outside the Council." Ambassador Prilla spoke up from her water tank. "The Yulani delegate makes an excellent point. For too long, we have hidden our vulnerabilities from each other, pretending that they did not exist. Perhaps it is time to stop pretending." Laura exchanged a glance with Kevin. Her aide looked as surprised as she felt. "This is an interesting proposal," Laura said slowly. "But sharing our contingency plans would make them less effective as defensive measures for humanity. If everyone knows how we would fight, they can prepare countermeasures." Theric agreed. "That is the point. Mutual vulnerability creates mutual respect. If we all know each other's weaknesses, none of us can afford to be the first to attack. It is a balance of power built on transparency instead of secrets." Laura's mind raced through the implications. This was a radical idea. It went against every instinct that humanity had developed over thousands of years of conflict. Secrets were power. Knowledge was survival. To give that up willingly seemed like madness. But maybe madness was what the galaxy needed. "I would need to consult with my government," she said. "This is not a decision I can make alone." "Of course," Zethkal said. "But tell us, Ambassador, speaking only for yourself, do you believe this proposal has merit?" Laura considered the question for a long moment. She thought about Earth, about her people, about the long history of war and suspicion that had shaped humanity. She thought about the future, about what the galaxy could become if species stopped hiding from each other. "I believe it has merit," she said finally. "But I would add one condition." "Name it," Theric said. "We share everything. Not just humanity's files, but everyone's. Every species in this chamber opens their contingency plans, their intelligence files, their secret assessments. We stop pretending that we do not watch each other and analyze each other and prepare for the worst. We acknowledge reality and work together with clear eyes." The assembly erupted in conversation. Some delegates shouted in protest. Others nodded in thoughtful agreement. The Makari collective buzzed with intense deliberation, their clicks creating a wall of sound that drowned out everything else. Laura stood quietly at her podium, watching the chaos unfold. She had thrown a stone into a still pond, and now the ripples were spreading in every direction. After several minutes, Prella raised a tentacle for silence. The chamber slowly quieted. "The human proposal is radical," she said. "But perhaps radical measures are what we need. The Kreth are coming. We do not have time for comfortable lies." She turned her many eyes toward Laura. "The Solani will share our contingency files. We will trust the humans because they have earned that trust today. Not by hiding their nature, but by revealing it." One by one, other delegations began to voice their agreement. The Vorsani, the Makari, even Theric and the Yulani. After a moment of visible internal struggle, not everyone agreed. Some species withdrew from the chamber in protest, their delegates stalking out with expressions of anger and disgust. But a majority remained. A majority was willing to try something new. By the end of the session, a new coalition had formed. It was not built on the polite fictions of the old council. It was built on something harder and more honest. Mutual understanding, mutual respect, and yes, mutual fear. As the assembly adjourned, Kevin leaned close to Laura. "Did you plan this outcome?" he asked. Laura gathered her documents and headed for the exit. Her legs felt weak, and she wanted nothing more than to find a quiet place and rest. But she kept her composure. Ambassadors did not show weakness in public. "I planned for every outcome," she said. "This was just the one I hoped for." Kevin shook his head in amazement. "You are either a genius or the luckiest person alive. I not both." Laura allowed herself a small smile. Behind her, the great hall of the Galactic Council hummed with activity. Delegates were already beginning the difficult work of building real alliances, ones that acknowledged the darkness in every species. It would not be easy. It would not be comfortable. There would be setbacks and failures and moments when the whole fragile structure threatened to collapse. But for the first time in the history of the galactic community, the species represented in that chamber were being honest with each other. They were seeing each other clearly, without the filters of politeness and pretense. Laura walked out of the hall and into the corridor beyond. Through the windows, she could see the stars stretching away into infinity. Somewhere out there, the Kreth were gathering their forces, preparing to consume another world. Somewhere out there, other threats were waiting to emerge. But for the first time, the galaxy was preparing to face those threats together. United not by comfortable lies, but by uncomfortable truths. And that, Laura thought, was the most human victory of all. She did not know if this new understanding would last. She did not know if the fragile trust she had built today would survive the challenges ahead. But she knew one thing for certain. Humanity was no longer invisible. Humanity was no longer underestimated. The galaxy had finally seen humans as they truly were, and instead of turning away in fear, they had chosen to stand together. It was not a perfect outcome, but it was a beginning, and sometimes beginnings were enough.